Good morning. It's Saturday morning here in Australia, and since my last diary entry a week ago, I've moved. I've moved from wonderful, beautiful Airlie Beach down south to Melbourne, where I am now. And I'm at the pier at a place called Nelson. I'm gonna walk and show you the skyline of Melbourne. It's a great city. It's all the way down south in Australia, and having been in Airlie Beach and Cairns where it was so hot and humid, I thought, finally, a little bit chillier weather, a little bit cooler. And then I came, and there's a heat wave right now. Yesterday, my first day in Melbourne, I was walking around the CBD and the downtown area, and I tell you, it was so hot. I think I saw someplace that it was 37 degrees centigrade. I have no idea how much that is in Fahrenheit, so you need to look it up. Just take my word for it. It was super hot. And today it's a lot more chilly. So I actually put on a long sleeved shirt and jeans, and it's much nicer now, maybe around 22 degrees here in the morning. And it's a beautiful city, and I think for 7 years in a row it was voted the most livable city in the world. It's safe, it's got a good infrastructure, the schools are great, the healthcare is perfect, and it's a wonderful place, and there's a lot to see. I'm going to be staying here for 2 weeks, not in Melbourne, because tomorrow morning I'm going to tick off another bucket man because I just saw a boat right here that's called John Batman. I'm gonna tick off another bucket list item, as I'm going to spend a couple of days driving the Great Ocean Road, which is one of the most stunningly beautiful pieces of road along the coast west of Melbourne, and I think that's going to be absolutely amazing. So I'm making my way to the end of the pier. I'm putting this out as a podcast and also as a video. If you're watching the video that I put on Facebook and my YouTube channel, you will know this by now, but if you're just listening to the podcast, you might want to head over and watch the video, because now I'm at the end of the pier, or almost at the end of the pier, and here is a great view of the marina, and behind that, the skyline of Melbourne. And it goes to show that it's not a small town. They've got some skyscrapers, really interesting, and some great views from the skyscrapers. I'm going to see if I can get up into the tallest one of them before I leave. Yeah, as I mentioned, I'm going to do the Great Ocean Road, and I'm going to spend 2-3 days doing that. And then from the end of that, I'm not going the same way back. I'm actually heading north to a place where that's in the countryside, a place called Pretty Pine. I mentioned it briefly last week, and it's because when I was in the very early days of my journey, I went to Bratislava and stayed at a hostel there. And there were a couple of Australians, and one of them was a guy called Jason, and he told me he was, I think, in the mid-20s at the time. And he told me that his dad had a farm, his brother had a farm, and the next day he told me, they just called me and told me they bought a farm for me as well in Pretty Pine. And then I said, Jason, how big is Pretty Pine? I've never heard of it. I love the name, but how big is Pretty Pine? And then he said, well, it's not like it's a town, it's more like a pub. So I told him, Jason, you know what? Here's a promise from me. When I get to Australia, I'm gonna make it up to Pretty Pine and have a beer with you at the Pretty Pine pub. And that was in 2016. And now, six and a half years later, I'm here. And I reached out to Jason and I said, still want to get that beer at the Pretty Pine pub? And Jason said, absolutely. So after the Great Ocean Road, I'm driving the 400 kilometers northeast to Pretty Pine to see Jason and hear about what it's like to live as a farmer in the rural part of Australia. And that's going to be something different from being in a big city like Melbourne. But I'm really looking forward to seeing him again. He was super nice and we connected. So it's going to be good to see him again. And and then after that I'm heading back to Melbourne, staying a few more days before the end of the month, where I go back to Sydney to get ready for my cruise. I still had a few things that I didn't get to see the last time I was in Sydney, so I'm going a few days earlier, 5 days before the cruise starts, and then I'm meeting up with my good friend Cynthia, who's flying in from Florida, and we're going to be spending a few days seeing some sights in Sydney, which is going to be great. So that's my life right now. I'm still enjoying my life here in Australia, and I also have had time to produce some episodes of the Radio Vagabond from my road trip to the Old West in the US. I put out an episode on Tuesday about my trip to Billings and Yellowstone National Park and the Devil's Tower, where they made the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Steven Spielberg movie about aliens. And in the one that's coming out on Tuesday, Travel Tuesday, I am going to hear some ghost stories in a place called Deadwood. Don't know if you've seen the series about Deadwood and the movie, but it's an interesting place, and it's really the iconic Old West. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do Mount Rushmore with the presidents. I'm gonna visit a site right next to it called Crazy Horse, where the Native Americans are making a monument that's even bigger and kind of an answer and a response to Mount Rushmore, where the presidents look out over the land that they stole from the Native American people. So they're making the Indian Crazy Horse on a horse pointing out into the distance. And then I'm doing a visit to the Badlands, which is some of the most astonishing nature I've ever seen in my life. That's coming out next Tuesday, so look forward to that. Make sure that you follow the podcast on, just search for the Radio Vagabond. You can find it anywhere you like. And with that, my name is Palabo, and I gotta keep moving. See ya.
This episode is brought to you in part by Hotels25.com. It's a website that helps you find the best prices on hotels around the world. Hotels25.com.
Radio Vagabond. Produceret af radioguru.dk